Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Here's a look at what's lined up for you on the show tonight. Our cover story tonight is about the ego of one man. An ego so large that it has absolutely no tolerance for dissent. You probably already know who I'm talking about. If there is one thing the Chinese President Xi Jinping absolutely cannot digest, it is dissent. But now things have reached a point that he likes to see his name so much that one omission of his name bothers him to an extent that millions of copies of a newspaper had to be recalled for this one reason. Will Xi Jinping sack the editor of the newspaper, People's Daily? Has control become such an extreme phenomenon in the country? That's our top focus tonight. Also on the show for you, antibiotic-resistant superbugs have been found in LA. We tell you what they are and why this is a matter of concern. Meanwhile, the fallout of the US Intel leak continues to grip America. We tell you about the origins of the leak and how the web of revelations has now only turned murkier, with the document supposedly saying Egypt was planning to supply rockets to Russia. Why is the Labour Party targeting Rishi Sunak's wife? Why are the Sunaks once again in the eye of the storm? Are you planning to call in sick to work? A fake sick leave? You might have to give that a rethink, as artificial intelligence could soon detect your lies. We tell you how. Psychophancy towards the powerful is a fact around the world. But to discover its depths, you have to turn to dictatorships. Have a look at this story coming in from China. In the year 2012, a new chapter started in the People's Republic of China. The Chinese Communist Party elected a new general secretary. His name was Xi Jinping. Standing 5 feet 11, he was taller, physically at least, than any Chinese leader. His demeanor was unlike any Chinese leader in recent history. You know, not the typical leader that people in China had gotten used to. The Chinese media portrayed him as a family man, a caring son, a doting father, and a loyal husband. They called him a man of compassion, someone who would bring a fresh breeze to Chinese politics. His followers even wrote love songs about him, odes, academic papers, even cartoons. But little did they know that their hero would, once he had acquired the power of the kind not seen since the Mao era, begin to develop an oversized ego. And that is exactly what happened. We are now in 2023, and Xi Jinping has cemented his position at the pinnacle of power. In fact, his critics say that he is preparing to rule for life. He literally controls every aspect of life in China, after all. And from what people study, to what they speak about, to what they watch, how they work, how many children they have, even the kind of hairstyles that they can keep. We will discuss all of that in just a bit. But first, let me tell you why I'm telling you all this. Have a look at this report. Recently, People's Daily, the official newspaper of the Central Committee of the CCP, had to recall 3 million of its copies. 3 million copies. It had to reprint them. And why is that? Because Xi Jinping's name was omitted from a commentary on national unity. You see, a page 5 report in the newspaper had a paragraph about Xi Jinping, but it did not include Xi's name after the word comrade. Here's what the sentence read initially. The central government with comrade at the core assesses the situation. This sentence had to be corrected to read the central government with comrade Xi Jinping. And this one error, this one omission was considered such an enormous crime that the paper recalled 3 million copies. Why is that? Fear, perhaps? Even terror? You see, they were afraid that this one minor error could upset their leader, Xi Jinping. But the question is, has it? Well, here's what many reporters in China are speculating. They say that the current chief editor of People's Daily, Tuo Zhen, could be purged due to this mistake by one of his authors. Can you believe that? Comrade Zhen was promoted to the position just recently in 2018, and years later he could lose his job because one of the sub-editors forgot to put the great leader's name in one paragraph in an article on page 5. This is because of the homage that Xi Jinping expects to be paid personally to him had not been paid. And some analysts have a word for this kind of power going to your head: megalomania. It is not the party line anymore that you have to watch. Anything that does not conform to Xi Jinping's thought is censored. And anything that is perceived to be demeaning to Xi Jinping invites punishment in one form or another. You see, in 2020, this man was banned from Chinese social media. His name was Liu Keqian. He is an opera singer in Berlin. All his pictures and posts are censored on Chinese social media. Why is that? What's his crime? His DNA. More simply, and you may not believe this, his looks. Liu was punished for looking like the Chinese president, Xi Jinping. You heard that right. The CCP said the resemblance is offensive. It accused Liu of violating the leader's looks. Those are the exact words that they used. And we kind of agree with them. How dare he look like the supreme leader? He should have had better control over his genes. And if you think that's bizarre, then have a look at this report. In 2018, China banned a movie on Winnie the Pooh. You know, the cartoon character. A movie based on it was blocked from release. And that's because the character had become a light-hearted way for people across China to mock their president. Turns out Xi Jinping did not find the joke very funny. And by the way, the censorship is not just limited to jokes on the Chinese president. Like I said, it permeates every aspect of life in China. In September 2021, China banned effeminate men from television, men who did not seem masculine enough. The country's TV regulator called them quote-unquote sissy and girly guns, asking them to stop indulging in abnormal aesthetics. Apparently, sissy men do not conform to Xi Jinping's idea of what the ideal Chinese man must look like. So off with his head, or at least off with his pictures. In November 2021, China banned celebrities from showing off their wealth. It asked them to keep their personal lives private and promote socialist values and opinions. Hypocrisy. The wealth wasn't taken away, only the visibility to avoid any public reaction against the inequality that has become the true reality of China in the last 2 decades. And the same year, it imposed limitations on the number of hours that children spend playing video games. It asked parents and gaming companies to not let children play for more than 3 hours. Not just that, China has also banned after-school tutoring. You know, the coaching centers that children go to after school, China banned those as well. Why? To reduce the pressure on the overburdened students. And these were just a few examples. There are many more instances of censorship, many more examples of authoritarianism. And they all reveal the same thing. How the idea of control in China has gone beyond strategic purposes. How, in the Xi Jinping era, control has become an extreme phenomenon. And anyone who makes even an inadvertent mistake lives in the terror of being punished. And as for Xi Jinping, he sees himself as a savior, a modern-day emperor who must restore China to its place as the world's greatest power. You know, so that he can become the most powerful ruler in the world. Let me now ask you a question. What if you catch a cold or flu and no drug is able to cure it? No antibiotic or antifungal seems to be working? That sounds quite scary, does it not? We hope not, but it can very well happen to you. Some bacteria become resistant to antibiotics. They become superbugs. And once they enter your body, they cannot be killed by any medicine. And for the first time, 2 such superbugs have been detected in Los Angeles County wastewater. They can spread at an alarming rate. Antibiotic resistance easily goes undetected. Will this cause a silent pandemic? The superbugs were found in water samples from 2 water treatment facilities, the Joint Water Pollution Control Plant and Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant, the same plant that came under heavy criticism in July 2021. This was when it released millions of gallons of untreated sewage into the Santa Monica Bay. There were equipment failures, unheeded alarms, insufficient staffing. You see, Hyperion has history attached to it. In fact, both Hyperion and Joint Water Pollution Control are LA County's largest treatment plants. They serve around 7.5 million people. And all of these people were at risk. 7.5 million people. They could have been exposed to these superbugs. These bacteria are notorious, to say the least. Even the last resort antibiotics fail to kill them. They sicken those who have weak immune systems. And you know what the scariest part is? Antibiotic resistance is controlled by specific genes. And these genes are present in bacterial DNA called plasmid. And if you know how bacteria multiply, you would know how easily plasmid is shared among different bacteria. Just to put it simply, antibiotic resistance spreads very easily. Any bacteria can become resistant to antimicrobials. For now, 2 new superbugs have been found, but in reality, these germs are more widespread than we can imagine. And their presence in LA wastewater just proves my point. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, over 2.8 million such infections take place every year in the US. Antimicrobial resistance, in fact, kills 35,000 Americans annually. In the year 2019, it killed nearly 5 million people worldwide. Can you imagine that? This was more than the deaths due to HIV or malaria. But everyone somehow seems to be sleeping on this fact. In fact, self-medication has become increasingly common. People abuse over-the-counter drugs. Antibiotics have become the go-to medicines for the slightest of cold and fever. In fact, India tops the list of antibiotic consumption. Very often, physicians prescribe antibiotics when they are not even required. Pharmacy staff are not fully qualified to sell these medicines. They sell them without prescriptions. And the COVID-19 pandemic has only made matters worse. It has accelerated antibiotic resistance cases, infections due to resistant E. coli salmonella, also gonorrhea, increased by at least 15% in 2022 as compared to the rates in 2017. And why did that happen? Because people consumed more antibiotics than ever. There was overprescription of the drugs. It was bound to create ripple effects. But to this extent, it's quite scary. For some of us, bacterial resistance could mean more visits to the doctor, prolonged illnesses, possibly even more toxic drugs. But for others, it could mean death. The number of bacteria resistant to antibiotics has increased tenfold. These superbugs are evading not only broad-spectrum antibiotics, but also the last line of defense. Colistin doesn't work on them. Carbapenems don't work on them. If someone is infected, we have very little at our disposal to treat them. Do you know what this means? We could usher in an age when common infections and minor injuries can once again kill. People dying due to tetanus or strep throat could once again be a possibility. We could get to the point where we cannot fight infections with antibiotics. It would be a post-antibiotic world. I don't mean to scare you, but it is what it is. This is what's happening. More microbes are developing resistance against our medicines. Antibiotics kill all bacteria except those resistant to drugs. Superbugs survive, and they are excreted in wastewater. They spread further, causing more infections and deaths. So how exactly will the cycle end? And when? How soon? Will antibiotic resistance continue to increase? Will it cause a silent pandemic? And our next story is from the United Kingdom. But before I start off, I want you to look at an advertisement. This one. This ad was posted by the Twitter handle of the UK's Labour Party. It features a picture of the UK's Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and a caption which reads, "Do you think it's right to raise taxes for working people when your family benefited from a tax loophole?" Rishi Sunak does. Not just that, it follows that up by saying, and I'm quoting again, "A Labour government would freeze council tax this year, paid for by a proper windfall tax on oil and gas giants." And what is all this about? Well, this was a direct attack on Rishi Sunak's wife, Akshata Murthy, a venture capitalist and the daughter of Narayana and Sudha Murthy, the founders of Indian multinational IT firm Infosys. Last year, when Sunak entered 10 Downing Street, questions started emerging on his wife's tax affairs. Reports said that she had potentially avoided paying 20 million euros in UK tax. That is around 197 crore rupees, give or take. And how? Well, through her non-domicile tax status. And what's that? A non-domicile status typically applies to someone who was born overseas and spends much of their time in the UK, but still considers another country to be their permanent residence or domicile. So reports said that Murthy gets 11.5 million euros a year from her stake in Infosys and her non-domicile status. And this news, of course, did not go down well with the British opposition. They called it breathtaking hypocrisy. They accused Sunak of raising taxes on others during a cost of living crisis, but letting his wife reduce her liabilities. Akshata Murthy has promised to pay her UK taxes on all her worldwide income, but the controversy has not died down. The Labour Party is still latching on to it to discredit Sunak's work as the Prime Minister. In fact, here's what the leader of the Labour Party recently said about this. I'm quoting, "Rishi Sunak is the chief architect of choices prioritizing the wealthiest and of the government's failure to get a grip of the economy and get growth going. The voters must know that Rishi Sunak's fingerprints are all over their struggling household budgets." Now, here's the thing. Citizenship of an individual living in the UK is irrelevant when it comes to non-domicile status, as it is possible for a UK citizen or someone born in the UK to claim that they are a non-dom. And as for Rishi Sunak's wife, ever since the controversy broke out, she's given up the remittance basis, which lets non-doms shield their overseas income from the UK taxman. Yet the Labour Party latches on to this controversy, and it's also facing the consequences of doing so, in fact. Have a look at this report. The Labour leader is facing a furious backlash from his own MPs about the attacks against Sunak. The report states that Labour MPs have personally complained to their leader, warning him that such ads will damage the party's standing, especially in the blue wall seats in the south of England. Remember, on the 4th of May, England is going to polls to elect councillors. And so far, Labour Party has the clear lead. In fact, it is leading at 44% on voting intention polls. The Conservatives are way behind at 30%. And this is a significant lead, one that the Labour Party has not enjoyed in a long time. Is it because of the personal attacks that it is making against Rishi Sunak? Are they getting traction among the British citizens? Well, we will find out soon enough. And staying on with the UK, it has come up with a rather bizarre quit smoking plan. You know what it's doing? It's planning to initiate a scheme. It's called Swap to Stop. What's that? Smokers essentially will be encouraged to swap their cigarettes with vapes. In fact, Britain will provide 1 million vaping starter kits in order to reduce tobacco consumption. Will vapes replace nicotine patches in the UK? And why does the UK see vaping as a better alternative? At a time when children and adults are being urged to quit vaping, the UK is acting on the contrary. It is planning to reduce tobacco consumption below 5% by the end of the decade. But how will this be possible? It plans to do that by getting people hooked to vapes instead of cigarettes, it seems. What does Britain's Swap to Stop scheme actually entail? Let's break it down for you. First, 1 million smokers will receive a free vaping starter kit, which the UK says is the first of its kind. Next, pregnant women will be offered $497 to stop smoking cigarettes. The government will also launch a consultation to urge manufacturers to put advice on quitting tobacco inside the cigarette packs. The scheme also includes a crackdown on underage and illicit vape sales. And while the UK has a really low percentage of smokers as compared to earlier years, will the introduction of free vapes really help? Experts say that although vapes are less harmful, they are not the silver bullet. Let's first see how an e-cigarette really works. E-cigarettes, or vapes as they are called, contain a liquid which is made of a mixture of nicotine, propylene glycol, glycerine, and other chemicals. The machine is battery operated, so when the user takes a puff, it activates the battery, which then vaporizes the liquid and the user inhales the vapor. Now, make no mistake, vapes are addictive and they can cause serious long-term effects. In fact, researchers have linked vaping to severe lung injury, heart attacks, neurological injuries, seizures as well. And all of these injuries are identical to the effects of traditional smoking. So how is this better? With more incidents of children using vapes, the UK government is planning to clamp down on shops selling vapes to people under the age of 18. The Department of Health, in fact, will allocate over $3.7 million to tackle the issue. So what is Britain's plan of action for the pro-vape scheme? The government is planning to include local authorities in the first wave of this free vape policy. This is before a larger national scheme is rolled out. Over the next 2 years, officials say the plan will cost nearly $56 million, which will be funded by the health department. It seems like the UK is planning to use the lesser than the two evils approach, because neither smoking nor vaping is beneficial for human health. In fact, studies show that smoking is more harmful than vaping, but like we said, vaping is addictive. Smoking affects non-smokers as well, as second-hand smoke contains more than 7,000 toxic chemicals, from which nearly 70 of them cause cancer. And hopefully the UK will be informing its citizens regarding the ill effects of vaping before distributing free vapes. But is this the best approach towards stopping smoking in the country, or will this fall sideways and boost vape addiction? Our next story is about the leak of America's highly classified documents and the murky web of revelations that's followed. And while the leak has sent shockwaves around the world, the White House says there could be additional leaks. Let's break it down for you. The bizarre turn of events started with a social media platform called Discord. It has especially gained popularity among the gamers. So did ordinary gamers release the top secret information? This might come as a shock, but yes. It has emerged that during a light-hearted conversation among gamers, a player casually uploaded the documents and exposed a world power in a chat room meant for gaming. And this is embarrassing, to say the least, for government agencies. The Pentagon is now monitoring the online gaming forum and making efforts to remove posts with the classified files. Researchers, on the other hand, saying that there is no point of censorship as the information is all over the internet now.
Who's responsible for this? And we don't know if they have more that they intend to post. So we're watching this and monitoring it as best we can. But the truth and the honest answer to your question is we don't know. And is that a matter of concern to us? You're darn right it is.
And the documents have now brought Egypt in the spotlight, but not for the right reasons. The leaked intel has targeted the Egyptian president. The documents say that he was planning to produce and ship up to 40,000 rockets to Russia. And this move has apparently depleted Egypt's stock of ammunition during the 13-month invasion of Ukraine. Is the US still defending itself? The National Security Council is still not confirming the validity of the documents, but has warned the media that the leaked material is not for public consumption. It looks like it might be too late to say that, as the entire world now has access to supposedly secret information.
You've heard others across the interagency say, which is that the Department of the Defense and the intelligence community are reviewing and assessing the validity of these documents. There is no question, of course, that they present a risk to national security, but I'm just not going to get into specifics beyond that.
But you see, if the information is proven to be true, it could easily damage America's relations with one of its closest allies. The accusation that's been levied on Egypt could just make matters worse, as Joe Biden had commended Egypt regarding its stand on the Ukraine war. It could seem that America might not have been speaking the entire truth then. Well, there is more data regarding weapon shipments to Russia and Ukraine. I'm specifically talking about Pakistan, which is apparently, as per reports, planning to send 44 tanks to war-torn Ukraine. This is the same Pakistan, of course, which has strong ties with Russia. So how exactly is this possible? Ukraine and Pakistan have been old partners in defense trade. Till 2020, Ukraine had supplied $1.6 billion worth of weapons to Pakistan. So is this Pakistan trying to return the favor? Is that what's happening? There have been instances where Pakistani artillery was spotted in Ukraine. On the 1st of January, a new type of Pakistani ammunition was found with the Ukrainian army. The ammunition is speculated to be purchased from Pakistan in the year 2022. So why would Pakistan send weapons to Ukraine? Reports, in fact, saying that Pakistan could transfer its 44T 80UD main battle tanks in exchange for financial assistance from the West. Although nothing has been confirmed, it makes sense for Pakistan as it reels under intense economic and political stress. Have you ever called in sick at work, saying that you have severe cold or fever perhaps? But that excuse might not work anymore. As it turns out, after our jobs, artificial intelligence is after our leaves as well. And we have Indian researchers to thank for this. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. Artificial intelligence can now detect whether you are actually sick or not. How exactly? Just by simply listening to your voice. It's no rocket science. The virus or the infection does alter a person's voice. The vocal cords often get inflamed. Their acoustic properties are impacted. But it's relatively easy to fake a cold while on a phone call. Routine slackers know how to do this. Nervously cough down the phone, add in a few sniffs here and there, talk in a deep voice perhaps, and you are good to go. But this will not work anymore if your employer adopts artificial intelligence. Let me tell you how this works. Human speech has vocal rhythms. These rhythms vary when it comes to healthy and sick people. Researchers of Sardar Vallabhbhai National Institute of Technology developed an algorithm to make this distinction. And this algorithm can identify the vocal frequencies of those with sore throats. The researchers analyzed the vocal patterns of 630 people. 111 of them were suffering from a cold. Each was asked to count from 1 to 40. Describe what they did over the weekend. Read aloud a fable. The algorithm yielded accurate results around 70% of the time. Now, this is good news for companies that frequently receive sick leave applications. But will they employ AI to catch slackers? And what about those who feel burnt out, who are not in a right headspace to work? People who suffer from mental illness. Most companies do not have provisions for mental health leaves after all. And the same is true for menstrual leaves. And employees then end up hiding the actual reason for taking the day off, when they suffer from something which is rather uncomfortable for them to discuss? What will these people in these cases do once employers resort to AI? And the tool, by the way, is not foolproof. It has 30% chances of failing. What if it incorrectly identifies someone as being healthy when they are actually sick? What happens then? Can we really rely that much on artificial intelligence? Isn't it being perceived as an enemy on multiple fronts? The most important concern being AI stealing our jobs. And it has found its way in journalism as well. A Kuwaiti media house has introduced an AI-based virtual news anchor. Her name is Feather. She is wearing a white shirt and a black jacket. Did you notice something else? The AI anchor is not wearing a veil. Her head is uncovered. And now have a look at this. This is what female journalists usually look like in Kuwait. But apparently these cultural norms do not apply to Feather, the AI anchor. After AI anchors, there are AI models. At first, the star of Levi's new campaign looks like any other model. Her hair hanging over her shoulders, gazing into the camera with a high fashion stare. But if you look closely, something starts to seem a little off. She almost looks like a creepy doll. You can see that the model is a digital rendering. And she has the potential to put real-life models out of their jobs. Levi's partnered with digital studio LalaLand.ai to come up with this avatar. The AI model will start appearing on the brand's website later this year. You see, it's not just ChatGPT. Artificial intelligence is all around us. There's no way of escaping it, and it is coming for our jobs, be it through detecting fake sick leaves or replacing actual employees altogether. Do you have a personal computer at home? When was the last time you used it? If you cannot remember when, you may not be alone. You know, with the advent of smartphones, who needs a big box on their tabletops anymore? And that too when the two devices do the exact same thing. Or in some cases, the smartphone in your hand does a lot more. But this does not bode well for the personal computing industry. In our next report, we take a closer look at the state of affairs in the industry. We also explore whether the era of desktops is nearing its end. Have a look.
Computers have changed the world, and they continue to do that. It all began with the introduction of this machine in 1971. This is Kenbach 1. It was the world's first commercially available personal computer. Five years later, Apple came out with Apple I. In 1980, MS-DOS was born. And then IBM introduced its own personal computer for office or home use. And finally, by the 1990s, the Windows operating system revolutionized the industry as a whole. But why are we talking about the many firsts of personal computing today? That's because the day isn't far when some company will produce the world's last personal computer. Why are we saying this? Because shipments of personal computers have recently nosedived. Major players have reportedly suffered a fall in sales. According to data from market research firm IDC, Apple took the biggest hit among PC makers in the first quarter. Shipments of Apple's Mac computers plunged 40.5% in quarter 1 of 2023 as compared to the same period last year. With only 4.1 million units shipped, The numbers marked the largest percentage decline year-on-year among the top PC sellers. Dell Technologies posted the second largest decline, 31% in the same period. This was followed by fellow market leaders Lenovo and Asus. Their shipments fell by 30.3% each. HP's sales, meanwhile, fell by 24.2%. Overall, global PC shipments sank 29% to 56.9 million for the quarter. The decline followed a 28.1% drop in the fourth quarter of 2022. The latest numbers are even less than those recorded in 2019. The IDC report says sales of personal computers suffered a setback as more workers returned to office. This cooled down the high demand for tech products that was seen during the pandemic-era shift towards remote working. As a result, Apple and other firms are struggling to sell backlogs of inventory. But this is just one part of the challenge for tech firms. Consumers worldwide are dialing back on non-essential spending due to lingering inflation and tightened borrowing conditions. IDC says any improvement in PC sales trends is likely contingent on the health of the global economy.
Our next story is extraordinary and tragic, to say the least. And I guarantee that it will stay with you for a while. The protagonist of this story is called Coco. Coco was dealing with alcohol addiction and had to be treated for it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why is that extraordinary? After all, we all know someone who has dealt with alcohol addiction. Well, because Coco is not a human being. Before you start scratching your head, let me tell you what I'm talking about. Coco is a 2-year-old Labrador. You heard that right. And Coco has become the first canine to be treated for alcohol addiction. How exactly did this even happen? How did Coco get addicted to alcohol? Well, as it turns out, Coco's owner had a habit of leaving his drink out before sleeping. And that is how Coco started consuming alcohol and got addicted to it. And after Coco's owner died, he was taken to an animal welfare trust after going through canine alcohol withdrawal. You heard that right. According to the vets, this was the first time they saw a dog with alcohol withdrawal. Coco went through intensive treatment. It took 4 weeks of sedation so that his withdrawal symptoms could be reduced. The welfare trust, called the Woodside Animal Welfare Trust, also put out a post on Facebook. The post said, and I'm quoting from it, "We are so thankful that Coco is now out of danger and off all medication and is now starting to behave like a normal dog. While physically he seems to have recovered, mentally he is still very anxious at times." Just imagine what Coco had to go through. We hope Coco recovers fully at the earliest and goes on to live a healthy life. Let's now tell you about some of the other stories that made headlines around the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
The Philippines and the United States launched their largest ever joint military exercises as the long-standing allies seek to counter growing Chinese assertiveness. The war games come after China ended 3 days of military exercises around the Taiwan Strait.
Don't pay the bills! Don't pay the bills! Okay.
Doctors working in England's Public Health Service launched what has been billed as the most disruptive strike in its history in a dispute over pay and working conditions. The International Monetary Fund says close to 90% of advanced economies will experience slowing growth this year, while India and China are predicted to account for half of all growth. France's antitrust regulator is expected to go ahead soon with an investigation into Apple Inc. over complaints tied to changes that the iPhone maker made in 2021 to its app tracking policies. Indonesian court overturns controversial judicial order to delay 2024 polls by 2 years, says the lower court overstepped its jurisdiction and has no authority to make such decisions. The United Nations says it is now forced to make an appalling choice on whether to continue operations in Afghanistan after the Taliban banned women from working at the world body. More than 500 people evacuated as a wildfire hit South Korea's coastal city of Gangneung early on Tuesday, devastation across 20 acres of land. Thick sandstorms hit China's capital Beijing, enveloping the city in a layer of thick grey dust. Beijing authorities issue a yellow alert, the third highest of China's 4-tier color-coded weather warning system. Reigning Olympic champion Alexander Zverev has made a winning start to his clay season. The German overcame a stern challenge from Kazakhstan's Alexander Bublik to seal a 3-6, 6-2, 6-4 triumph. The 13th seed will now face Spain's Roberto Bautista Agut in the second round. Four-time major winner Rory McIlroy has pulled out of this week's RBC Heritage on the PGA Tour. No official reason has been given for the withdrawal, but the pullout comes after a disastrous performance from the Northern Irishman at the Masters and could lead to a financial loss.
On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. We are leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.
Знакомьтесь. Теплов, тепловик Иванович. 11 апреля 23 год.